Hello, and welcome to the Three Links Oddcast, your podcast for all things having to do with Odd Fellowship. And now, here are your hosts. Well, welcome everybody to the Three Links Oddcast. I'm your host, Toby Hansen.
I'm Ainsley Heilich.
I'm Sergio Paredes.
And we're really happy to have all 152 of you listeners on board. This is our second episode, and I'm happy to say we have a sponsor. This episode is brought to you by Pig and a Pug Bath Stuff. They have soaps and all sorts of bath products. It's really good stuff. You can look them up on both Facebook and Etsy, and they're running a really special deal for all the listeners of the Three Links podcast. You get 24% off your first order with the special code THANKYOU24. That's thank you and the number 24. Well, welcome everybody. This is our second episode. We're really happy to be here. And we're going to be talking about what Odd Fellowship is like in different parts of the country. To help us do that, we're very fortunate to have a special guest joining us from Friendship Lodge number 20 in Massachusetts, Brother Eric Fearing. Welcome, brother.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. I really like that first episode, being among your 152.
Oh, thank you.
I look forward to
Thank
listening
you.
to the podcast as we go on forward.
Yeah, we were just looking at the distribution stats and going, wow, there's like 5 listeners in Massachusetts. This is awesome.
Yeah, I expect there's a number from Friendship Lodge because a couple of us heard about it and shared that out on a Slack channel, which is a great way to communicate when you've got folks who will be in a chat with each other over the course of a given week, you know?
Yeah, and that is wonderful. It's really great that you are stepping up and using some of the newer technology to foster communication in your lodge. That is a great idea. And speaking of what's going on in your lodge, the theme of this episode is about what it's like to be an odd fellow in different parts of the country. So, Brother Eric, we're going to start with you, and you can tell us about what's going on in your lodge and in Massachusetts and hopefully the northeastern United States.
Sure thing. So I've been an Odd Fellow for 10 years now in Friendship Lodge number 20, which is in Belmont, Mass., just the suburbs of Boston. And I became Grand Guardian my first time on the Grand Lodge board this term, which turns out is going to be extra long because of the coronavirus. When I started 10 years ago, there were generally 5 people coming to meetings first and third Mondays. And quorum would get scraped together. If somebody giving somebody else a ride wasn't going to be able to make it, phone calls would go out saying, don't bother coming out to Belmont because we're not going to be able to open the lodge. So that's where it was for a while. And then 2-3 years ago, we had a real boom. A couple of the folks in the lodge from around the time I joined were friends with a number of people who were sort of interested in the idea of Odd Fellows. A lot of us are live action role players, which involves some like elements of cosplay and costume and like marching around pretending you're slightly more important than you might actually be in real life. And they kind of took to the idea of fraternal order ritual real quick.
Oh, that sounds like the perfect kind of people to join the Odd Fellows. Putting on old costumes, pretending to be something from centuries past, and pretending you're more important than you are. Yeah, they're perfect Odd Fellows.
Yeah, it was fertile ground. We've happily been able to expand beyond just that number of folks that a couple of us already knew to some friends of friends and coworkers. So we've gone from 5 people, if we were lucky, to having 15 or 20 at most in-person meetings. I think there's 36 or 37 people on the lodge roster at this point. Some of them elderly folks who've moved out of state and we just hear from occasionally, but a good active membership that is almost to the point where we can sort of grow on our own, which is really nice.
What was the time frame, would you say, that was between the 5 and the 15 as far as like active members?
Yeah, that's really been more or less over the last 2 years. I joined and was sort of a sixth in the regular rotation. A couple others joined around that same time, so we had somewhere in the 7-8 range. And then even a few years later, we got a couple more, and then they each got a couple more, and it's grown almost exponentially for a little while, to where we've managed to fill all the chairs like one election after we had really started to grow. And so that's great. Like, you don't, I had never been at a meeting where there was a color bearer and a musician in the first 9 years, but now it's pretty good.
That's impressive.
There's that certain excitement
really good.
that happens when you realize, oh, we have an outside guardian, we can do that part of the opening.
Yep, absolutely. Just the installation to see everyone arrayed on the floor is like, wow, there are a lot of people at this meeting. And I think that's really important to getting new people involved, is that is pretty impressive in and of itself. And I think too often we've sort of put aside that part of ritual and pomp and circumstance, and that's actually a good recruitment tool. It's something that people should come in and be able to see. I know the folks younger than me in my lodge really like it.
Now, that's an interesting issue that you raise there. You say the pomp and circumstance is a good recruitment tool. Why do you think that is? It's
sort of unique. Like, it gives identity to what's going on. It's not just a sort of social hangout somewhere. If you have a building, you're lucky to have a building, and that can be its own independent draw. But to get people to show up to a business meeting, if you're really just reading some bills and sitting around, is a lot less interesting than going through some ritual and having people reading their parts and actually participating in things. It also makes it feel like something hundreds of years old that you're a part of. And losing that element just because it takes too long is a real shame.
Now, that's something that I have noticed in my area, because I'm on the opposite side of the country from you on the West Coast. And the younger, newer members here do not like the expediency of the way things were done, the past 30, 40 years, where the older members said, oh, let's get rid of all that. We don't need to say that part. We'll just cut it back. And the younger, newer members really like the fact that we walk in straight lines, we turn square corners, we do all of our ritual, we wear regalia. It makes the experience very meaningful to them. And, this is something that I'm hearing in other parts of the country, that newer, younger members like those sort of antiquated aspects of Odd Fellowship. But what about the rest of you? Have you guys noticed anything like that?
I think I pretty much, that's what I pretty much think along those same lines. I think it's all goes under that umbrella of a shared experience. Not everybody has that experience, not everybody's witnessed it. So just being able to be a part of it, that's kind of like something that's unique. And nowadays everything's pretty much instant, and you could zap it on your phone in a few seconds. It's nice to be able to go somewhere where it's not easily accessible, but yet it's fun. There's people who actually go out of their way to look for that. So that's always cool. And then, if the people don't smell too bad, that's a plus as well.
Yeah, funny you should mention that. Those of you who do smell bad, might I suggest Pig and a Pug bath stuff. They make soap.
That's right.
And I have some of the Pig and Pug soaps, and they are fantastic. They come in regular soap shapes, and you can also get unique soap shapes like skulls and owls, and they all have different scents. And it's really, really high quality handmade soaps, and I highly recommend them to anybody looking for some really unique, cool soap to give as gifts or for themselves even, because, we're doing a lot of hand washing today. So,
Yes, I've washed my hands several times today, but that's also because I helped my daughter change a flat tire on her car this morning. But still, hand washing, very fun, very important. And the best thing about Pig and a Pug is that their soap maker is Brother Christopher McHale, who's an Odd Fellow. He belongs to Covenant Lodge number 6 in Missoula, Montana. So hopefully we'll be able to get him as a guest in the future. But for right now, we have our special guest, Brother Eric Fearing. of Friendship Lodge number 20 in Massachusetts. And he was telling us about some of the things going on in his lodge. Anything else you want to add about what your lodge is doing and what makes it successful?
I think the other noteworthy thing is that the opportunities to volunteer together and get outside the lodge an extra day have been really useful in finding ways to socially connect with each other and feel like we're actually leaning into that mission of helping humanity. We've done volunteer shifts preparing a meal at a women's shelter, homeless shelters where we often end up doing dishes, but it's fun. Packing meals for folks who are homebound. There's lots of different opportunities around Boston that we've sort of looked for ways to bring a group of people from the lodge all at once to go and do volunteering. We've also fixed up the lodge hall, painted the lodge room, desperately needed a fresh coat of paint after many decades of misuse. And that gives people a sense of ownership. So all of that's been really excellent.
How's the reception been as far as the surrounding communities? Has everybody been welcoming, or people are like, oh, what's with those 3 links or anything like that? Or
people are welcoming. People don't tend to know what the Oddfellows are. We actually, I think for maybe just 1 year now, because we canceled this spring, we staffed the tent for the Mad Science competition at a local steampunk festival called Watch City in Waltham. So we had some of our stuff set up, and we're basically just telling people how to vote for their favorite little fake science project, but also saying, like, we're here from the Oddfellows Lodge. And this is, of course, a great place to talk about things from hundreds of years ago with people who like dressing up funny. So if you've got a steampunk event,
perfect.
Yeah, I feel like steampunk and Oddfellows
right
should definitely go hand in hand with the aesthetic.
Yep. Yeah, I could totally see that. We got to start recruiting at all of the steampunk fairs now.
Yes, we do. I better start using that hashtag on my post.
Yeah,
we got a couple of people show up and say, like, oh, the Oddfellows, right. I remember you from when I moved across the country, and there used to be an Oddfellows Lodge. Tell me about it. It's great.
Cool.
You've had a couple of applications. It was good fun.
Now, one thing you mentioned in the email that you sent me before the show, you found it to be very successful and very helpful to get new people involved with projects. What can you tell us about that?
I mean, the first thing that some of the new crop of folks did was paint the lodge hall. We were closed for the summer and thought we should get a coat of paint up. And so people ended up being there more often during the summer when everybody smelled bad because no air conditioning yet, to get some paint on the walls. And it really increases ownership. Since then, we've torn out some ruddy old cabinets. We've cleaned the place up, sorted a bunch of the regalia. I don't know if this is true everywhere across the country, but it certainly is in New England. There used to be a lot of lodges per square mile. And so some of the things have piled up into the lodges that still have buildings. And we had many, many, many old and disused robes and props and such stuffed away.
At my lodge, they
that really needed a good cleanup. Yeah. We had probably 7,000 bowls.
7,000 bowls, wow.
Like many sets of china from many different lodges.
Yeah, when they close down, it's always, oh, let's send these to the lodge in the neighboring town. They can use it. And then it snowballs from there because that lodge closes in 2 sets. Yeah. Go to the next one and the next one and the next one. There's a lodge in Eugene, Oregon, Spencer Butte number 9. And they were founded, I believe, in the 1860s. They're a very, very early lodge in Oregon. And they have place settings for like 200 people, and it's all of the beautiful old 19th century china with the hand-painted scroll work on the side. It says Spencer Butte number 9, IOOF, Eugene, Oregon. It's absolutely beautiful, but there's a point at which you have too much china, and you cannot possibly store all of it. It's like, oh, we've got 14 lodges worth of china here in our hall up in the attic. It's like, okay, no, at that point, it's way too much.
And that's why there's never a shortage on eBay or Etsy or any of those places. You always find all kinds of different trinkets and stuff like that from lodges past.
And of course, every time a seller finds something like that, they're like, "Oh, this is super rare. I bet this is worth $300."
Yeah.
No, it's not. Ward and Stilson sold several thousand sets of that.
I think it's safe to say that, and this is probably definitely for a different episode on collecting, but I think all Oddfellows are collectors of Oddfellow memorabilia to some extent, and I feel like everybody's collection has at least one piece of china and one of those trivets.
Oh yes, we
I'm
love
not there yet
collecting
with
all
the
this
china.
cool stuff. I don't have any china yet, though.
And I don't have a trivet.
Actually,
Yeah,
speaking of trivets, I don't know if you've seen it, but Lodge Cast Iron used to make the trivet that had the 3 links and the heart and hand on it. And they haven't made those in a long time. I might have found one. So it's down in Georgia. I'm waiting for the woman to email me back because she's going to clean it up for me and make sure that it's in good condition. So I might actually score an Oddfellows trivet.
Nice.
But as you were saying, back in Massachusetts, lots of lodge halls back there. You had a whole bunch of stuff. You had to do some cleaning.
Yep. We did some cleaning. We did a fair amount of repair work, and that leads to people sort of dreaming about what the space could look like and doing a little bit of renovations. And once you've got some member buy-in, you're in a good place. We've got one member who does a lot of picture framing, who's taken a lot of old photographs to work and taken scrap frames to get things that all look custom framed up on the walls. Like these little things that people can do that just make it a much nicer, more inviting and personalized space.
An active hall is a fun hall to be in for meetings, for events, for whatever. Because when you walk into a building that looks like it's been abandoned since 1957, and there's a half-inch thick layer of dust on everything, and that horrible gold-colored Berber carpet on half of the stuff and Naugahyde on the other half of it, you just think, is this actually a living organization? Is this something that's still happening? No, it's not. It's an Oddfellows hall. And so it's very important that your members were able to dig in and make your hall look like an actual living, breathing, and inviting place. You want a hall where people are like, hey, let's go down to the hall and hang out. That is a good sign that you have an active and interesting lodge.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was gonna say, my goal with every person that I take up to show our lodge room to is to have them look at it and be like, I never in a million years would have expected something this cool to be in a building in downtown, in the middle of nowhere, Tuscola. And that makes me feel so good that like we're doing a good job of creating that space that is unique, and it's almost like a little magic paradise in a way where literally the world is shut out, and you go into this room that's got all this cool antiques and stuff to look at and old pictures and regalia, and it just, the vibe that the lodge room gives, because even though the lodge is its members, not the room or the building, the lodge room itself is almost like its own member of the lodge, and you need to treat it with respect and make sure it keeps making people want to come back.
Yeah, that's absolutely it. When you have a lodge that's interesting, active, and engaging, the lodge hall reflects that because it shows what's going on, and it shows that people are there being active and doing fun things. So, Brother Eric, you were telling us about your lodge. What about your jurisdiction of Massachusetts and maybe some wider regional things going on in New England? What's Odd Fellowship like around that area?
So I think the big events over the course of the year that the Grand Lodge runs are a degree rally, where it's very important to get everybody to actually dress up in the costumes and go through live degrees. I know recently an initiatory degree got done while most of the lodge waited outside, and one degree master and a DVD player had 2 socially distanced initiates inside. But obviously that's not what you want every time.
But that's nice. You guys are adapting to the current situation. That's really interesting.
Yeah. The so the Grand Lodge hosts a degree rally where they put on the first, second, and third degree uh, basically every year. I think sometimes we've actually managed to do it twice. And Friendship Lodge is generally the host because we're in the denser half of the state and pretty easy to get to. Uh, have a set of everything. One of those little projects people have done is like get garment bags with labels on all of those costumes so they're not just collecting dust in the back. Um, so doing live degrees draws people from all over. And although I haven't done a whole lot outside of Massachusetts, I did some of my degrees at a rally in New Hampshire 10 years ago. And it's very common to see folks from Rhode Island and New Hampshire at even that event, just a degree rally there in Belmont, even if they don't necessarily have candidates to take the degrees. The other big thing is some charity fundraising for the Arthritis Foundation. The Mass Grand Lodge raises a lot of money for the Arthritis Foundation via the annual Arthritis Ball, which they hold in the middle of the state, which also draws a bunch of folks. It's useful to have people bring their partners and actually get a few more people than you might know and see on a regular basis at Lodge to come out and do that activity as well. As far as the across New England, there is a camp up in Maine called Camp Neofa, New England Odd Fellows Association, NEOFA, that is a summer camp, and they're not running now, but we have every year they hold a conclave to sort of get together, socialize, do a little bit of cleanup there before the season starts. And that's a great way to see people from all across New England Odd Fellowship. And we've sent the grandkids of some of our lodge members up to go and see where their parents met when they were kids of Odd Fellows.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for sharing all that information about Odd Fellowship in the Northeast. Next, Brother Ainsley, how'd you like to tell us about Odd Fellowship in the Heartland?
In the Heartland. Well, historically, Odd Fellowship has been very strong in the Midwest region with the in the 1860s with the westward expansion with the railroads and everything. So every little railroad town had a lodge. So in Illinois, we're still holding strong with a little over 50 lodges that are hopefully going to be staying around that once we get open back up. I would hate to see any lodges have to drop off their charter if, post COVID. That's always something we're worried about. The changes once things do move forward and open up again. But we are pretty evenly dispersed throughout the state, even though the most populous region is the northeast corner of the state where Chicago is. There are some Chicago lodges, but they're actually pretty inactive. The most active lodges up there are in the far Chicago suburbs, and they do a lot of great big activities that are huge events that are, I think one of them is like a multi-day music fest that one of them does. And they definitely are the big money movers. My lodge in particular, we're a smaller lodge. We aren't the biggest, big bang, big buck money raisers, but we do what we can, and we try to kind of fill in gaps that other organizations in our community might not be, focusing on right now. Like, we'll try to pick the projects that aren't maybe necessarily like the sexiest, high profile, fun things to do. And there's a lodge near us in Mount Zion, which is about 40 minutes from me. They're a pretty big lodge. I think they've got over 100 members, and they do huge fundraisers. They do like a big gun raffle every year. It's like a 60 guns in 60 days, and they have big events as well. And so we've got a good handful of lodges that I would refer to as our powerhouse lodges that do the big events. And then the rest of the lodges kind of just do the smaller things, the more traditional, the pancake breakfast, the spaghetti dinners, that sort of thing. But we do have, it's really exciting seeing a couple lodges kind of waking back up and starting to host activities for the first time in a number of years and get their lodge halls cleaned up and get, a little bit of that renovation started. So it's really exciting to see, you know, you lose a lodge, but then like another lodge might have been sleeping, but it finally gets that right person in the door to like kind of wake up and get things moving again. And it's not about number of lodges. It's just about how many lodges are actually doing something, in my book, at least.
Yeah. Well, that's all very good information. What would you say, because I know you're involved in your Grand Lodge there in Illinois,
Mm-hmm.
what would you say is something that differentiates the things that you do in a small town rural lodge as opposed to one of the suburban lodges around one of the bigger cities?
One of the things definitely is it's probably easier to attract a larger crowd event in the more populous areas. Granted, there is a lot more competition for attention in those areas, so they do have to work probably a lot harder to get eyes on their events. So they might have to do a little bit more of the traditional newspaper, news media type promotions just to get, you know, or maybe radio ads, stuff like that, to get eyes and ears on what they're doing. Whereas like down here, it's these, you know, like if we do an event, like we'll put it in the paper, and we, you know, if it's odd market, we will do a news segment. But other than that, we just do it all on Facebook. And, you know, because our events really, since they are a smaller scale, if we only have like 25 to 50 people show up, that's plenty. And that's really all we're really able to handle anyway, for most of what we do, at least inside the lodge hall. But when it's outside stuff, of course, we try to shoot for the moon as high as we can go.
All right. Now, what would you say, what's Odd Fellowship like, either on a state level or regionally in the Midwest? Because you're pretty much smack dab in the middle of the country. You got Indiana, Kentucky, Missouri, Iowa, Wisconsin all around you. So what's it like regionally as an Odd Fellow?
So we are part of the Great Lakes Conference. I can't tell you exactly which states are in it offhand, but it's probably like Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, I think Ohio, and Michigan. I might be missing somebody. And I do feel like in most of those jurisdictions, I do believe that the lodge numbers are still pretty decent. Illinois does a lot of crossover work with the southern Wisconsin lodges, like Janesville 14, I believe. I think that's kind of right over the border in Wisconsin. And they do a lot of joint degree events with our northern Illinois lodges. And we always have, you know, grandmasters coming over from Indiana or Michigan or wherever, whenever we have Grand Lodge sessions. And we don't get a ton of crossover with the Missouri Odd Fellows. I could be totally wrong about that, but I do have a brother that he actually is a truck driver, and he's, I think, the Grand Warden currently of Missouri, and he actually passes through Tuscola once every couple of weeks on his truck route. And so he's going to be able to, once we're back open, he wants to make an official visit to our lodge as a grand body representative from his jurisdiction. So that'll be exciting.
That's always fun to do. Speaking as someone who served as both Grand Patriarch and Grand Master in my jurisdiction, nothing is quite as much fun as being out on the road and visiting lodges, because lodges get so excited just when someone else comes to visit them, because it's like an odd fellow from somewhere else. But then when it's some kind of a dignitary, it's like twice as fun. It's so much fun. I love doing that during my time going through the chairs of the Grand Encampment and the Grand Lodge. So anything else you want to add to Odd Fellowship in the Midwest?
I just love it. I think that, you know, every lodge that I've, you know, been able to visit is most of the lodges I've visited have been the more smaller town lodges. And it's just so fun to go visit each different lodge and how it looks different, how it feels different, how, you know, even though they might have been, you know, instituted around the same time, it's just the differences between all these little identical small towns it shows in their lodge. And I think it's just a fantastic way to learn about the history of this region, and just to if you're into old architecture, I love, one of my favorite things to do on the weekend is to go, I call it lodge hunting, where we used to have well over 1,000 lodges in Illinois at our peak, like 100 years ago. So there's plenty of ghost lodges out there for me to go and go hunt down. Like anytime I'm going into a new town, I try to find their old lodge and try to take a picture of it if the lodge is still up. So there's quite a few. If anybody's into abandoned buildings and urban exploration, lodge hunting is a great way to have a specific niche in that subcategory of like abandoned architecture.
Cool.
Not quite the answer we were looking for, but it's an answer.
No, but that's a good answer. All of this stuff is interesting because no matter where you are, there is going to be an old abandoned former Oddfellows Hall not too far from you. I mean, you can even go up in the mountains, anywhere in the West, and every little mining town will have had at one time an Oddfellows Lodge, and there's a hall left over either, a good example of that is Idaho City, Idaho. Pioneer Lodge number 1 was chartered in 1863 when Idaho was still part of Washington Territory. And, it wasn't really split off into its own territory or anything like that. Pioneer number 1 is still going. And recently they just got a whole bunch of members from the Idaho City Historical Society to join Pioneer Lodge number 1 to ensure that there are new people. Now that's way up in the mountains in an old mining area, far away from the population center. I think it's about 45 minutes northeast of Boise for anyone who's familiar with Idaho. But even in the smallest, middle of nowhere town, you're going to find old Oddfellows halls. They're out there, and you can find them. And as Oddfellows, we look at the buildings and we go, oh yeah, I recognize that. Yep, that was a lodge hall.
Always look up. That's what I tell
right.
people. Yeah, always look up. I love on Instagram, because I go through all the IOOF and Oddfellows tags, and I love seeing all the documentation of current lodges, ghost lodges, and neon signs, and all the stuff that people, or like gravestones or anything that people don't even know about us, but they see it and they think it's cool, and they take a picture and they post it, and then a bunch of us then find it and then comment on it and hope to woo them to coming, and checking into us a little bit more.
That's right. Well, thank you so much for that summary. We're going to take a quick break and listen to a commercial. Look at us. We're so important now in our second episode. We have a commercial. So we'll be back right after this. Hello, friends. Toby Hansen here. Do you like soap? I like soap. In fact, I use soap several times a day. I'm here to tell you about a wonderful company that makes soap, Pig and a Pug Bath Stuff. They started a few years ago in the mountain town of Dahlonega, Georgia, by a crazy-haired lady who was always covered in animal hair. After relocating to Missoula, Montana, and expanding exponentially, it has become a two-person team. They specialize in hot process soaps and bath bombs, but also sell boatloads of candles, melt and pour soaps, and sugar scrubs. No order is too big, and wholesale orders are definitely welcome. Pig and a Pug Bath Stuff. Find them on Facebook and on Etsy, and spend that stimulus check with them. And as a special favor to listeners to the Three Links podcast, they are offering a 24% discount on their Etsy store. Just use the code THANKYOU24 at checkout. That's thank you and the number 24. Pig and a Pug Bath Stuff. Excellent soaps for washing up. All right. That was a word from our sponsor, Pig and a Pug Bath Stuff. They make Wonderful soaps, bath bombs, sugar scrubs, all kind of good stuff, right in the heart of the Bitterroot Valley in Missoula, Montana. And Brother Christopher McHale of Covenant Lodge number 6, he's the one making up the soaps there. He does those cool skull-shaped soaps. So if you're an odd fellow and you bathe, which I don't want to assume, we've all been to Grand Lodge, so we know. If you're an odd fellow and you bathe, I highly recommend getting some of their soaps. Special discount right now, 24% off with the code thank you and the number 24 in their Etsy shop. So that means we're going to turn it over to you now, Brother Sergio. You belong to Golden Rule number 35 in Los Angeles, California. So tell us about Odd Fellowship in the Southwest.
So I'm from Los Angeles, Golden Rule 35, where the lodge is actually right in East Los Angeles, stone's throw away from downtown. Right now, you would think it's a busy metro area. There'll be a lot of activity, but as on the Oddfellow side, it's a little more dormant. I'm pretty new. I'm barely going on a year. So unfortunately, this year doesn't, not too much progress was made, unfortunately. But I did get to learn how to use the computer a lot more, so I got these meetings down pretty good. But right now, I joined a lodge. It was pretty much just a very small core group of members that continued having their meetings. I reached out to them, and through networking and email and communication and everything, I found my way to them. And then they're pretty active with some of the surrounding lodges. So like America Lodge in Pasadena, Redondo Beach, more towards the beach cities, and a few other lodges. So there's a small group of us in the South SoCal, but not as active as some of the other fraternities. And that's actually one of the main things I'm looking to hopefully change. So hearing Eric, hopefully maybe I'll try the Dungeons and Dragons and see what's out there and see if people want to come.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. The main thing you guys are known for in the Southern California is you guys are very focused on the Rose Float. That's kind of like the big thing down there, right?
So that's actually, from my understanding, pretty much there's a member from all the lodges that participate in that. It's a pretty big thing. They have members come in from other states, I hear, as well. I was looking to participate, but I don't know how this year is going to work out with everything. But yeah, that's their really big thing. So usually, from my understanding, it starts around this time, summer. They do their testing. I know they do like their first walkthrough inspections in July. So that's one of their main projects in the Southern California area. And actually, I never really realized that until I joined the Oddfellows, and then they actually have all their floats that go back decades. So they've been a part of it for quite a while. So it's
1908, I think. Don't quote me on that, but I think 1908 might be the first year they did a float.
That could be right. They've been a part of it for like
very long time.
Yeah, in my lodge they have photos from before it was even called like the Rose Parade, I think. From like the very early stages, they've been active in it. So that's one of the main things. They also had a camp up in Northern California that they also have. I know that one is kind of, they're kind of renovating it, if I'm not mistaken. And then as far as, those are like the main projects. As far as like on the individual lodge level, my lodge is pretty dormant right now, but we have other lodges that also get together with surrounding lodges in other counties. So even though we're small, we still communicate and everything. So right now, in the last lodge meeting we have on Zoom, they were actually planning and making the donations, and I think they mentioned something about the Rose Parade. So.
Excellent. Now I've got a question for you.
Yes.
You're in Los Angeles, and that's not just a big city, but it's a really big metropolitan area. But one thing that I've noticed around the country is lodges may die out in the middle of a city, but out on the fringes of the city, you still have plenty of lodges. What would you say the distribution of lodges is like around Southern California? You know, Los Angeles, Orange County. You know, what's it like? How many lodges do you have in that area?
I would say probably within LA County and Orange County, the ones that I know about, we probably have maybe about 10. So like in LA County, you have your metro, and our lodge would probably be the closest thing to like downtown LA.
Okay.
But then we have America Lodge, which is probably 30 minutes away. Then we have Redondo Beach, which is more on the southern tip of the county. And that one from downtown LA is probably about 45 minutes. So we have lodges, but they're kind of scattered. So for the most part, they're all within like, the closest ones are within 45 minutes. And then the more outreach are probably like an hour or two.
Okay.
So there's a handful of lodges. They're just kind of all scattered. So they're not as close together. So that's why when we have members, it's kind of surprising when you think about how far they travel. Some people drive, 2 hours just to come to a lodge meeting.
Is it
That's
common for
dedication.
folks in
I'm
Southern
sorry?
California? Are there a lot of folks who are associate members in many different lodges? Like, are there folks who are going to many meetings in a week? Because that's pretty common around Massachusetts,
Yeah, we do
where
have some
you're
members who
15
have
minutes away
associates.
from another lodge most of the time.
Yeah, so in my lodge, a couple of the members, they're associate members at joining lodges, and that's why we do a lot of events together. So when I did my initiation, I actually did it at a local lodge. So we had members from my lodge, we had their members, and then we had other members coming in from other counties to actually do their initiation as well when we did that. So we kind of joined our resources, and then they had a huge initiatory degree ritual with the full get up and everything, music, props, the whole shebang. So in that respects, even though we might be scattered when it comes down to do business, everybody kind of falls in line, and we make it happen. So it's really unique in that way.
Now, here's a follow-up question to that one. Brother Eric asked about associate members of neighboring lodges. Do you have a lot of involvement in encampments in your area? Because one of the reasons for having encampments is it allows the sort of highest group, I don't necessarily want to make a value judgment there, but the group of most active members from a bunch of lodges in the area to get together and meet together as one unit, as an encampment. So anytime there's a situation like that where you have associate members in neighboring lodges, I always wondering if you also have an encampment that covers that group of lodges.
Well, for the encampment, since I recently got my third degree, I actually started reaching out. So one of the members from one of the surrounding lodges, he's a member of a local encampment. So before I was able to touch bases with him, the only one that I was able to actually find was in another county. But within LA County, there is actually an encampment. So they meet at I want to say Bellflower Lodge, and from
Okay.
downtown LA, that's probably about 45 minutes, maybe an hour. So once again, that's just kind of, I think that's their main meetup. But then the members kind of go to other lodges as well, other functions. But for the encampment in LA County, they said it's like a core group of 12 members right now.
Okay.
So I'm reaching out. I'm looking to hopefully be 13.
All right. Now I know that you're still fairly a new member here. You've been a member for about a year. Have you heard or seen anything about what goes on outside of Southern California? Like what's going on up in Northern California, or maybe east of you in Arizona, or maybe down in San Diego, or anything like that?
Not really, because when I joined, I was just getting to meet members. The beginning of this year, I actually attended their officer installation. and then everything just kind of was put on pause. So I couldn't really get to network as I wanted to with local members. So to supplement that, I reached out, and the online Oddfellows network is really strong. So it's really easy to kind of, even though I wasn't able to meet everybody locally, with the lockdowns and everything, the online community has just been amazing. So that kind of helped me stay in the loop, and some questions that I'm not able to ask, a fellow member right away. There's somebody always awake online in the local Oddfellow communities to answer any and every question, so that's always a plus. But unfortunately, the timing just didn't work out, and I wasn't able to meet as many people as I wanted. I was actually planning with another member of my lodge to start visiting the local lodges that were listed on the Grand Lodge website, but I didn't get that far because I had a conflicting schedule. So hopefully, once things kind of smooth over, I look forward to definitely reaching out and getting to know more of the local members around here.
Excellent. I'll tell you, it is a lot of fun to go visit other lodges. Even before I was a grand officer in any capacity, I always enjoyed visiting the other lodges around me, and visiting lodges when I travel too, because one great thing about being an Oddfellow is if you are traveling somewhere, you find instant friends the minute you find a lodge that you can visit. Everybody is happy to have visitors come in, and you can have a lot of fun times. I did a show in Rochester, New York one time, and I got to visit Humboldt Lodge number 138 in Rochester, and I had so much fun during the 6 weeks that I was there performing. Because as a performer, you socialize with the other people you perform with, but you also like to get out and do other things on occasion. And belonging to a fraternal order like the Oddfellows means you get to go out and visit people and make instant friends wherever you go, which is always a lot of fun.
I'm sure somebody like you going around to different lodges is probably like a rock star coming to visit for the night, because you're so well known in the order and being the sovereign grand musician now. I don't know if you were at what your position was at the time, but at least now I feel like you're Oddfellow famous. So
well, I seem to be getting there. I don't know that I'm quite Oddfellow famous yet. I'm no Ken Babb, for example. I'm not quite Terry Barrett yet, but I'm working on it.
You're working on it.
Eventually, I'll get there. Well, I suppose I should probably say a little bit about Odd Fellowship here in the Pacific Northwest. I belong to Ballard Alki Lodge 170, which is in Seattle. And that's the only lodge in Seattle. At one time, Seattle, like most major cities, had 35 lodges. There were halls all over town, including a big, beautiful, gigantic building on Capitol Hill. Anybody who heard about the occupied protest zone in Seattle recently, the old main Oddfellows building there in Seattle was at the corner of 10th and Pine Street, right on the edge of that occupied zone. So that is a beautiful building. It's home of the Century Ballroom. I get the opportunity to perform there pretty regularly when there is not a pandemic on. I've not been playing much recently because of that. So I belong to the last lodge left in Seattle, which is Ballard Alki number 170. But about, 15 years ago, I actually moved out of Seattle, down about an hour south of Seattle. So I live out in the country now. And I wanted to keep my primary membership in Seattle, but I also wanted to participate in a local lodge that was easier to get to and be involved with. So I took an associate membership in Buckley Lodge number 75 in the town of Buckley, which is about a half hour east of me up in the Cascade Mountain foothills. And some of our listeners out there might have heard of past Sovereign Grand Master Art Craig. He was Sovereign Grand Master, I believe, in 2001, and he was a member of Buckley Lodge number 75. So we have Brother Art's picture up on the wall in the lodge hall looking over us at all times. And I've been an associate member of Buckley 75 for a little over 10 years now. That allows me to stay connected to Odd Fellowship locally, but also maintain my contacts with all of my good friends in Ballard. So what we do in Ballard, since it's right in the heart of a really busy urban neighborhood, and in Seattle, there's so much growth and so much change. And, you know, Ballard used to be kind of a working class fishing village within the city. All of that is getting replaced. It's all big high-rise condos, you know, $300,000, 800 square foot, really high-end type of stuff because it's becoming such a high-tech place. So our lodge is kind of an oasis in the middle of all of this urban kind of nameless, faceless development. You know, it's a little piece of what the neighborhood used to be when the neighborhood had its own institutions. You know, there was a bank that was just in Ballard, and you'd go to the corner market and shop. Well, we got the Oddfellows Hall there. We have all sorts of fun activities. We used to do the community dinners where a group would come together and work with the lodge to feed homeless people. That's since been discontinued because of a couple of issues with that. But we also have the art walk. We have various discussion salons. There's a movie night the first Thursday of the month. And then a lot of fun social activities are put on at the lodge because we have a very diverse urban lodge, and so we have some members who are part of the Sufi Muslim community, and so they bring their community in to have events at the lodge. We have members from the Fremont Arts Council, which is a neighborhood arts council in one of the adjoining neighborhoods to Ballard, and they'll have meetings and events there at the hall. And so it's really kind of the last accessible public space left in the neighborhood. So that's the urban side of it. Now, I participate regularly in my associate lodge, Buckley 75, which is a rural lodge in an old logging and railroad town in the mountains, which is lots of fun because we got an ancient old brick building built in 1892, and it's always fun to see the way the farmers and loggers used to fix the building on the cheap 50 and 60 years ago. In the dining room, we had plaster over the brick, except for the fact that plaster was expensive in those days and plywood was cheap because they had the lumber mill in town. So they put 1/4-inch plywood over the brick and then plaster over that to save money. Well, that's great, except that brick absorbs moisture, and so does plywood, and the plywood swells up and it cracks, and you get kind of a mess. But the last 5 years or so, we've put a lot of time and effort into redoing the plaster, putting up new lighting in the hall. We replaced our horrible old industrial gas heaters that hung from the ceiling and put in nice ductless heat pumps so we can be warm in the winter and cool in the summer. That's a lodge that 10 years ago was near death. It's a lot like what Brother Eric described in Massachusetts at his lodge. We would get the call at 6:30 before a lodge night if a member wasn't going to make it, because one member not being there meant no quorum. So then we'd all turn around and go home. Well, it so happened that during my term as Grand Master, a year and a half ago now, I went to visit another lodge in another part of Washington State, Golden Rule 207, in Napavine. And there were actually a number of members of that lodge who lived much closer to the Buckley Lodge. And I said, hey guys, if there isn't some compelling reason why you're driving 2 hours out of your way for a lodge meet, why not join the Buckley Lodge? So we got 5 of them to transfer up to Buckley. And then they started telling their friends and their friends. And now we've got it up to where we have probably about 40 members on the rolls. And we get, prior to the pandemic, 10 to 15 out to a meeting at a time. So we're doing well. We're starting to interact with the community more. There is a food bank and a clothing bank in Buckley. We like to support both of them. Right before the pandemic, we had a sock drive, which was organized by one of our members, and we collected 153 pairs of socks to be handed out to the homeless. And in a wet climate like ours, socks are super, super important for those who don't have regular shelter. We've also done the senior soup suppers at the Buckley Community Center, where we cook batches of soup and serve it there. This summer, we were going to be involved in the Buckley Logging Jubilee. We were going to have a float in the parade, but that got canceled like everything else with the pandemic. So we're just sitting there in our building and kind of waiting until we can get out and do things. One new thing that we just voted in on Wednesday night, we started back meeting again in person on Wednesday. I got this idea from Christopher McHale of Missoula, Montana, Covenant Lodge number 6. His lodge has been going around buying up discount soccer equipment and giving it out to youth soccer associations and teams for kids who can't afford the equipment, the shin guards and pads and soccer cleats and things like that. That has proven to be a very successful project and a great way of interacting with the community. So we just voted to start doing that in Buckley, and we appointed our brand new member, Brother Stephen Downs, as chair of the committee, which will give him something to really get him engaged in what's going on in the lodge. So he's starting to put that program together right now. So that's kind of the local picture. At the state level, we have our Grand Lodge, which is headquartered in Buckley. They rent part of the downstairs of our Oddfellows Hall in Buckley. We have our Grand Secretary and the publisher and editor for our newspaper there. We've got 27 lodges in Washington, most of them pretty strong, and I'm proud to say that during my time going through the chairs of the Grand Lodge, I was able to help out some of our other state level members in saving a couple of those lodges. We worked hard for Golden Rule 207 in Napavine, Prosperity 301 in Wenatchee, and also Bothell 124 in Bothell. And I'm proud to say those are all functional, active lodges today that we were able to save with some effort from the Grand Lodge. Regionally, much as it pains me as a proud native Washingtonian, Oregon is a stronger jurisdiction than we are. They've got about 45 lodges right now, and they've really done a good job, not just in saving the urban lodges. There are several lodges around Portland. The lodges in all the other cities in Oregon are pretty strong, but they also really work hard on helping out the small town lodges. There's the little town of Heppner in eastern Oregon, Willow Lodge number 66, and if you're going to be anybody in the town of Heppner, you have to belong to the Oddfellows Lodge, because it's just that important. If you're going to do business, if you're going to go to the local farmers co-op or anything like that, you got to be an Oddfellow in that town, because that's really where things come together. So Oregon has had some growth recently. They've got a superstar lodge on the north side of Portland, Peninsula 128. That's the home of Brother David Shear, who revitalized the Noble Order of Muscovites. And some of you out there might have heard of that. And
Yes,
then
I've
over
seen
in
some of the
Idaho,
pictures too.
I dearly love the Oddfellows in Idaho. Sometimes they're a little hard to get a hold of, but they've got some good lodges there. The Boise area is very strong. They have multiple lodges in the Boise area and the whole Treasure Valley. And then dispersed around southern Idaho, there's some other great lodges. Portneuf number 20 in Pocatello. There's a Mountain Home, and I think it's number 19 in Mountain Home, Idaho. And then Coeur d'Alene number 34, which is one of only 2 lodges left in northern Idaho. It's a little sad that they don't have more in northern Idaho, but they're hanging on in Coeur d'Alene. They get together on Tuesday
Is that the
nights.
stick part?
That's the stick part. It's the pointy. Okay. It's the part that should have just been given to Montana, you know, or as I like to call it, the rest area east of Spokane. Because if you ever drive I-90 east, you know, from Seattle and across Washington State, it's an hour to go across northern Idaho because it's like 75 miles border to border. And so it's like you leave Spokane, and then at a certain point, you're like, we better get out and pee. And that's pretty much northern Idaho. And we just lost our listener in northern Idaho. Sorry about that. We're going to have to call somebody in Bonner's Ferry and convince them to subscribe to replace that listener. So, yeah, it's northern Idaho. Nice area. I really love Brother Jerry North. He belongs to the lodge in Coeur d'Alene. And then another place, British Columbia. We've got some great Oddfellows in BC, and that's an interesting jurisdiction because most of the Oddfellows are on Vancouver Island. They're all belonging to one of the lodges in Victoria or one of the couple other lodges scattered around the island. And then geographically, most of the rest of the province has maybe, 10 lodges, a couple in Vancouver proper, some in the Fraser Valley south and east of Vancouver, and then a couple way out in the mountains in central British Columbia. But we get together, those 4 jurisdictions, you mentioned the Midwest Conclave. Well, we have something like that here. The Northwest Oddfellow and Rebecca Association. We have a meeting twice a year in the spring and fall, and we get the leaders from the jurisdictions to come together, talk about what's going on, and share information, come up with some growth strategies, and help each other solve problems. You know, oftentimes out west here, we will have lodges that are closer to other jurisdictions than they are to our own Grand Lodge. And so Northwest Oddfellow and Rebecca Association helps us to foster the kind of cooperation across borders. For example, the Grand Lodge of Oregon worked really hard to try and save Baker Lodge number 35, which is in Baker City, Oregon, which is, a half hour from the Idaho border and maybe an hour total from the Boise area. But it's like 6 hours from the Grand Lodge in Portland. So they were able to communicate with the Oddfellows in Idaho, get them to go over and help them out in Baker City. Ultimately, that didn't work out as well as they'd hoped because they weren't able to save the lodge. But shows the kind of cooperation that we have amongst the jurisdictions.
So that's pretty much nationally, it seems like all the Oddfellow lodges are pretty much close-knit and everything.
Well, that's kind of the idea, is that, we may belong to different lodges, but we're all part of the same fraternity. So it helps when you have a lot of lodges in close proximity, but even when you don't have that, you can always find something. Even in Montana, which the entire jurisdiction is down to only 7 lodges, they will travel great distances to help one another out. I know that they do a district meeting that is basically all the lodges in western Montana, which can be a several-hour drive from one to the next, because you're talking about going from Hamilton or Missoula all the way up to Libby. That's a several-hour drive. But they make that drive on a regular basis to help each other out. So, that's just the nature of Odd Fellowship.
I think being an Odd Fellow, you kind of have to enjoy driving.
Oh, yes.
Because even if you live in close proximity to something, once you get involved enough, you're going to be driving far no matter what, be it to your Grand Lodge session or to some sort of like degree event that might be on the opposite corner of the state, or to Sovereign or whatever. It's a traveler's paradise if that's the route you want to take.
Yeah, we should look into like odd mileage or something so we could like cash in, maybe get AAA in on that.
Well, I don't know how it is in your jurisdictions, but when you attend the Grand Lodge of Washington, you get paid mileage by the Grand Lodge for going to Yakima, which is in the middle of the state, and attending the meeting. So that certainly helps to offset the cost, because it can be expensive attending a Grand Lodge session. And as I was Grand Master, one of the expectations is you visit Grand Lodge sessions in neighboring states. So I did the Grand Lodge of Oregon for a couple of years. I did the Grand Lodge of Idaho for a couple of years. Last year I did the Grand Lodge of Montana. I was never able to make it to British Columbia for their Grand Lodge. And I feel bad because I feel like I missed out there because they have some great people in BC. But I was never able to make it up there. But that's why it's good that we have the Northwest Association, because one of the pictures I put on Instagram during my term as Grand Master is the Fall Northwest in Hood River, Oregon, which I love the jurisdiction of Oregon. They always hold their meetings in beautiful resort communities. You know, Grand Lodge is in Seaside or Canyonville or something like that. And then when they host Northwest, it's in Hood River. Washington, we have a Grand Lodge in Yakima, which is not exactly picturesque, but it's very central. So I did a picture at the Fall Northwest that year of the 4 Grand Masters of the 4 jurisdictions all together. I was there, E.V. Smith from Oregon, Glenn Schultz from Idaho, and Bill Murphy from BC. And it was cool to have the 4 Grand Masters all there together. That was one of my favorite pictures from my time as Grand Master. So this brings us to our final segment of the podcast, which is called the Odd Podge. This is sort of our good of the order where we can share whatever we feel like sharing. And Brother Eric, since you're a guest here, I'd like to give you first crack at the Odd Podge.
Oh, wow. I should have seen this coming. Give me a question. What would you like to know?
If you could do one thing to improve Odd Fellowship at any level around where you live, what would you do?
Ooh, I think that if I could improve anything about any level, I think that the encampment degrees need a little work to get modern folks interested in working their way up through. And if I could just magic wand some of that, I think that would be a big improvement.
Yeah, if I could magic wand a lot of things that have to happen at Sovereign Grand Lodge.
Yeah.
All right, Brother Sergio, what do you have for the Odd Podge?
The only thing I could think of is since there tends to be some interest in the LA area, if anybody's interested, you could go online or Instagram. It's you could look up LA Golden Rule 35. I'm trying to get something going, so right now I'm just looking to kind of organize some kind of event and see if I could get the members together and see if I could get something going. Not right now, but hopefully sometime by the end of this year, if not next year, hopefully in time for summer. So that's what I'm working on.
And Brother Ainsley, how about you?
So today is July 10th, so tomorrow is July 11th. And July 11th, tomorrow, will be the 5th anniversary of the reinstitution of Tuscola 316. So nice. That is a very proud moment for me and my lodge. And our treasurer just did for our annual report, just did our numbers so I could plug it into the form because I am the lodge secretary. And so, like I said, we're not the biggest dollar lodge in the world, but we have donated over $14,000 into local community fundraising efforts in the past 5 years. So I'm very proud of my lodge. And for, it's, you know, been growing pains, you know, when getting a lodge going. It takes a lot of work. It's a labor of love, and it's a constant effort. And tomorrow we, you know, even though I say we're since 1865, we just took a 65-year break. Tomorrow will be we'll be turning 5. So that's an exciting moment.
That's right. Like the kids say nowadays in a relationship, you were on break.
Yes, exactly.
Well, excellent. And speaking of anniversaries and things like that, tomorrow your reinstituted lodge turns 5 years old. For my Odd Podge today, I want to mention that on Monday, July 13th, 2020, is the 20th anniversary of my initiation into the Independent Order of Odd Fellows.
Congratulations.
It was July 13th of 2000 that I sat there in the anteroom of the hall in Ballard in Seattle thinking, what the heck have I gotten myself into? But then I was restored to light and liberty, and wouldn't you know, eventually I became Grand Master. So, you know, it can happen to the best of us.
Yes.
Well, I want to thank Brother Eric Fearing of Friendship Number 20 back in Massachusetts for joining us for this episode of the Three Links Oddcast. Thank you very much, brother. Continued success to all of your efforts. And also want to give a shout out, because as if this isn't enough Odd Fellowship in podcast form, our brothers at Columbia Number 2 up in Victoria, British Columbia, are launching a new podcast themselves called The Modern Goat Rider. That's going to be out here pretty soon, so be sure and subscribe to that one too, because the more media stuff we can get for Odd Fellowship, the better. So on
and
behalf
on episode, I was going to say, and on episode 3, you're going to hear a familiar voice on there as well.
Oh, that's right. You did a cameo on their podcast.
I did.
Oh, we got to do a crossover episode. We got to get Billy and the guys to join us here on the Three Links Oddcast. Once more, I want to thank our sponsor, Pig and a Pug Bath Stuff. Beautiful soaps from wonderful Missoula, Montana. Brother Christopher McHale and his partner working on making those. Special deal for Odd Fellows listeners. Thank you, 24. Thank you, and the number 24 at checkout on their Etsy store. So on behalf of everyone here, I want to thank you all for listening, and stay well.